The School Foundation of Florence School District 1 is pleased to announce the 2015-2016 grant cycle for both major grants and mini classroom grants. This presentation has been developed to provide potential grant writers with an overview of the funding process, the review process, and to provide ongoing support as you are preparing your own proposal. We hope you'll refer to this presentation throughout the development process. We hope that you'll refer to the resources that are provided so that your grant has all of the elements that are required for consideration. The School Foundation was initially put into place so that it could provide support for all teachers in Florence School District 1, specifically in terms of major grants. What the Foundation Board Review Committee hopes to see in grants are those kinds of concepts that promote excellence in academic achievement, that build community involvement, or that encourage innovative leadership. There's a broad range of concepts that are very appropriate, and we encourage you to be creative as you develop the idea that you'll send forth for review. All grant applications are reviewed on a competitive basis. What that means is you'll want to develop the very best proposal that you can, because only a limited number of grants in both categories may be awarded. Your School Foundation Board is proud to announce that the 2015-16 funding total is over $119,000. These funds will be distributed among major grants and mini grants, and we look forward to placing these funds in your hands as you put into place innovative programs across our district. One of the most important things to keep in mind as you begin the application process is the deadline for submission of your application. This year, the application deadline is April the 17th at 3:30 p.m. Please note that no late submissions will be accepted. The School Foundation funds two types of grants. Major grants are those that seek to have a big impact, a broad impact across the school district, and to prepare students for success in a worldwide economy. Mini grants are designed for the classroom. They're designed to support teachers who'd like to bring innovative learning opportunities into their own classrooms. In this presentation, we'll look specifically at mini grants. Let's think now a little bit about the mini grant proposal process. The mini grants are designed to support classroom work or outreach or enrichment projects submitted by individual teachers, media coordinators, guidance counselors, or other professionals within the school district. Of course, groups and teams of individuals can also apply. One important thing to note as you consider writing a mini grant proposal, grantees must produce materials which facilitate adaptation of their project by other teachers in other locations. Much like the major grants, the mini grants have other defining characteristics. The award amount for a mini grant is $200 to $500. The proposals should focus on a special problem or an opportunity and present a well-developed plan that will enable you to deal with that issue in your classroom or within your school. You may use money to purchase materials or to accomplish the project or to hire a consultant, but you may not use money to pay salaries of Florence School District 1 employees or to pay for major equipment purchases, unless you can justify that equipment as a necessary part of the proposal and something that cannot be financed any other way. Remember that many grant funds are supposed to supplement something that's already in existence, not replace or supplant something. Also, note that once grant materials have been received, they do remain the property of the school that was the recipient of the grant unless other arrangements are made by the school foundation. Also keep in mind that the deadline for submission is April 17th at 3:30 p.m. Just a few more details on the mini grants. Note that while the mini grant award winners will be announced during the current school year, the grant period for implementation may not begin before August 2015. Also note that the funds must be completely spent during the school year that the grant is funded, and during that year, recipients must submit 4 progress reports, and the dates for those progress reports will be announced at the time that the awards are made. Finally, site visits will be conducted by the school foundation staff and the board during the granting period. These site visits are designed to celebrate the great things that you're doing through the use of the funding for your mini grant. These are times for the school foundation staff and board to visit, to see the projects in action, to see students using the materials or the activities that you've designed, and to give great publicity to you for your efforts as you have created this project. Again, do note that the submission deadline is firm. All submissions must be received by April the 17th at 3:30. There are certain things that reviewers will want to see. Much like those you would write for a lesson plan, reviewers will want to see clearly defined learning objectives that specifically state what will be the outcome of your project. Reviewers look for direct involvement of students and benefits to students. We look for creativity, innovation, involvement of the parents, community members, or businesses. We look for evidence that you are addressing a need that's truly important. And we look for ways that your project can be adapted by other teachers. Certainly, we want to know that large numbers of students are reached and that you have a cost-effective budget. One other element that you may want to include is how you have collaborated with the community or school partners to develop the proposal. As you begin to develop your concept for your mini grant, these are 3 questions that you may want to consider before you begin formally writing. Does the concept or the project that you plan to propose offer an innovative solution to a problem or an issue? Does it have promise of improving your school by addressing a specific school-wide issue? And does the project team, meaning you or your team, truly have the capacity to implement the program that you intend to propose? Other questions that the reviewers will consider are the statements of purpose and procedures for carrying out the proposed project written in a clear way. In other words, can we envision what you are presenting and proposing? Are your evaluation plans appropriate and suitable? Do they align with the objectives that you specify? And is the budget request reasonable? And have you provided enough detail for us to understand where the money will be spent? Grants Review Committee will take a look at each application using a very standardized rubric, the one that you see pictured to the right. We hope that you will use that rubric as well to inform the writing of your project, but also to inform the development of the concept. Let's take a look at each one of the sections of the rubric. The School Foundation Board has developed a new template for grant writers. The entire template will be available on the School Foundation Board website, and you're encouraged to type your proposal directly into that template, and note that the space will adjust as needed in each of the sections. Should you have tables, charts, or illustrations to be included, you may embed them directly in the template, or it may be easier to include them as an attachment. Be sure to reference the attachment as attachment 1 or 2, and to include a reference to that attachment within the template in the section to which it applies. Section A is the cover sheet. You see it pictured to the right. This sheet must be completely filled out. You must sign it, and you also must have the original signature of your principal. You will attach it as the first page of your project proposal. Section B is the project summary. It is actually included on the mini grant cover sheet, and in the space provided, you will provide the evaluation committee with just an overview of your concept for the grant. It should not exceed the space that's included on that page, so as you can see, it's a relatively short summary. This section has a point value of 5. Section C is your statement of need with a point value of 10. In this section, you'll do one of two things. You'll either explain what's going on in your school or your classroom that presents a need that you want to address with your proposal, or you'll identify a curriculum goal that, if you supplement it with the concept for which you're seeking funding, that would enhance the learning experience of your students. Either way is fine, but you'll want to be detailed enough for the review committee to clearly understand what the need is that you intend to address. In Section D, you'll respond to the need. You'll note that this section has a point value of 20. Therefore, you can see that it is a very important part of your proposal. In this section, you should explain how your project will respond to the need that you identified in Section C. We'll want to hear how your innovative and creative project will help to alleviate the problem or accelerate the learning that you identified in the curricular area. Be detailed enough here that each of the committee members, as they read, can envision this project that you believe will be very successful. Sections E, F, and I are intertwined, and it's important to see how they connect together. To that end, we've developed a sort of a mind map that will give you an opportunity to sketch out key elements before you begin to write your proposal. You can see that Section E will require you to identify your intended outcomes. Essentially, these are your goals or your objectives. Here you can see that there's an opportunity for you to develop 3 goals. There's no requirement that you have 3 goals. You may just have a single goal, but you can see that how this template would enable you to plan for as many as 3 goals. Once you identify your outcome, the next step will be to match to that outcome a method or a technique or procedure for bringing it to completion. In other words, these are the steps that you will take to move your project along toward that outcome. Also in Section F, you'll be asked to identify the materials that match with those methods or techniques. So you can see how you can plan for this using this mind map. And then last, Section I requires that you define the manner in which you will measure the success on your outcomes. In other words, your evaluation measures. So you can see that the evaluation measure will very definitely need to align with the outcome that you plan. By sketching it out using this mind map, you should be very prepared to begin with the actual writing process that is required for the grant proposal. Pictured here is a very rough example of how this mind map, this template, can be used to sort of frame your thinking as you begin to plan your project. You can see that in this example, there are 3 goals listed. Each goal has an associated method or procedure, the materials that are required, and ways that evaluation will take place. Again, for this mind map, this is just a rough sketch to ensure that as you're planning, you've got the required alignment in place so that every goal has outlined procedures and methods, materials, and also evaluation measures that will match up to those goals, and ultimately to illustrate how those goals and your success on those goals has been met. Let's now look at each of these sections and begin to think about how you will use this information to complete the remainder of the written portion of your project proposal. In Section E, you'll state your intended outcomes. These are essentially your project goals or objectives. And here you should state very clearly what the impact of your project will be on either your students, on yourself as a teacher, on the curriculum, and the district. And you can see that this area has a point value of 15 points. Therefore, it's extremely important that you are very clear and very succinct in the writing of your outcomes. You can see that I've indicated in the slide a way to identify 3 objectives. There is no specific number of objectives that are required. However, I do highly recommend that you number your objectives if you have more than one, because it will be very important for you to show how you are evaluating each of the objectives, and by numbering them here, you'll be able to carry that thread of numbering throughout your project. Section F provides you with an opportunity to tell about the methods, techniques, procedures, and the accompanying materials that will be needed in order to put your project into place. You can see that this also has a point value of 15 points. It's an important section of the proposal. You can see in the template that you've been provided an opportunity to tell the methods, techniques, and procedures that would then align with each of your goals. Of course, if you have only one goal, then you will not need to number your methods or procedures. However, if you have multiple goals, you'll want to at least in some way define how certain methods and techniques align with each of the separate goals. Also, you'll want to indicate what materials will be required and why those are important to the success of the project. While Section G, the timetable for completion, only represents 5 points of your total points, it is still a very important section of your proposal, because this section will help the review committee to understand how this project's going to sort of lay out across the academic year. Some suggestions that I'd offer here: begin with the month in which you expect to receive funding and hit the ground running. Plan aggressively to get this project going and in place. There are many discussions that occur when the committee takes a look at the timetable and say the project doesn't even actually seem to be getting it going until November or December. One of the things that the committee typically wants to see is that this project is going to have a big impact very quickly. And the reason that the timetable can begin, say, in August is because you've done such a tremendous job in the planning in terms of the proposal that there won't be needed time for planning or figuring out details. All of that has been taken care of in the actual plan, so you'll be ready to go in August. Some successful projects include a month-by-month timetable. Others hit key benchmarks in the project itself. For example, when training will begin, or on a new curriculum, or when certain specific activities will happen. So there's no expectation that you provide a month-by-month timetable. Instead, create a timetable that works with the specific project that you are developing and that you have conceptualized. Section 8 is your potential for replication. You can see that this section has a point value of 15. It's important that the committee can see through your project how the concept could be replicated in other classrooms or with other teachers. We'll want you to explain how you'll communicate your results with others. And there absolutely must be a plan that will facilitate project adaptation somewhere else in the district. Some examples of ways to do this is to plan for an informational session, or to develop a video or a Prezi or some sort of other representation of what happens in the project that you then will deliver somewhere else, either at a convening of school leaders, or on a staff development day with others who share your interest. You just need to be certain that you have some way to spread the good news, essentially, of your work so that others can take advantage of what you've learned and put a similar project into place in their schools or in their classrooms. Section I details your evaluation plan. You can see that this section has a point value of 10. And this is the area in which you will describe in measurable terms how you will evaluate each of your goals or each of the objectives that you identified earlier. Be certain that you are very specific and that it is very measurable. This should not be something that is generic in nature. It needs to be very clearly defined so that the reviewers can understand what your expectations are and how those outcomes that you identified earlier will be measured throughout the project and at the conclusion. You can see that the template has a listing for each of your goals, as well as a place for you to identify the timeline for measurement. What we know is that in some cases you might need to do a pre-assessment. You might do ongoing informal assessments. You might have a summative assessment. You might use surveys. There are all kinds of ways to evaluate your work. One suggestion that I highly recommend is that if you identify that you're going to use some sort of a formal assessment, for example, a paper pencil assessment or even a survey, that you develop that survey and attach it to your document. We want to know that you have thought through every detail so that as soon as the money is awarded, you are ready to roll with your project. The final section, Section J, is your itemized budget. And while this has a very low point value of only 5 points, I recommend that you carefully consider how you develop your budget, because our review committee looks at this very closely in an attempt to be good stewards of the school foundation's funding. What we'll look for in your budget is an itemized list of materials, supplies, equipment, travel, release time, whatever is involved in your project, along with the cost. It's very helpful for you to include quotes from companies or very specific itemized listing with documentation. We find that that's very helpful, and it certainly indicates a strong level of planning on your part. Be certain that you transfer that amount of the total budget request over to the cover sheet. That's important to include it there. Also, you'll need to include any in-kind contributions or items that you've secured through other sources, things like donations, existing grants, or perhaps a portion of your project will be funded through other school funds. The idea here is that we need to know everything that's involved in making this project come to fruition, even if the school foundation will not be funding it. If you have in-kind contributions, it's important to identify the source and provide any assurances that are necessary. And what we mean by assurances are statements from appropriate personnel who indicate that yes, this funding will be available should you receive the school foundation funding. Just a few final reminders for mini grants. Remember that your proposals may not exceed 7 pages in length, and that all proposals are due no later than 3:30 p.m. on April 17th. Late submissions will not be accepted. Remember to submit an original with original signatures and 9 additional copies. And in the case of mini grants, submission should be to the School Foundation office on West Chavis Street in Florence. The School Foundation will acknowledge receipt of each application, so be certain to look for that acknowledgement coming to you. We've tried to outline in great detail the way in which mini grants and major grant proposals should be written. But still, there are additional questions that we have learned pop up in the course of the writing process. We'll try to respond to those most frequently asked questions in the slides that follow. What about the review process? Grants are reviewed by the Foundation Grants Committee, and every complete grant application is reviewed. It depends on the number of grant requests and the complexity of the applications, but generally that process takes about 30 days. Sometimes the committee might ask for more information from you, from your school administrators or the curriculum coordinators. And in terms of the major grant awards, the top 3 major grant candidates will be required to give a presentation on their proposed grants to the committee, and that presentation will last about 60 minutes, and typically it's held at your school site. Finally, applications that are recommended by funding by the committee will be reviewed and approved by the entire board of directors of the school foundation. And once all grant materials have been received, they remain property of the school that was the recipient of the grant unless otherwise approved by the school foundation. The Grants Committee uses a combination of objective and subjective criteria to evaluate grant proposals. The rubric that we considered a little bit earlier is an example of the objective criteria, and of course the more of those criteria that are met yields a more favorable rating during the evaluation process. There are other criteria that we look for, things like innovation and creativity. We look for elements of student achievement growth, but we also look for student changes in terms of motivation and character development. So achievement's not the only measure of success or measure of a high quality grant. Unfortunately, we're not able to fund all of the requests due to the constraints of the budget. What we do promise, though, is to review every complete grant and to provide feedback about why certain grants are funded and others are not. We never want a writer to believe that a rejected request is because the concept is not appropriate or the writing was unsatisfactory. More questions? Who can apply for a grant? The process is open to all instructional staff within the district, and applications are available on the School Foundation website and on the Florence School District 1 website. Note that major grants are submitted to the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction's office on Dargan Street in Florence, while mini grants are submitted to the School Foundation office on West Chevis Street in Florence. Both major grants and mini grants both must be received on or before 3:30 p.m. on April 17, 2015. And in both cases, for both major grants and mini grants, you must submit one original and 9 copies. The Grants Committee of the School Foundation will evaluate the applications and make a recommendation to the Board of Directors. The rubric that we reviewed earlier is used to guide that evaluation process. Definitely include the name of the organization, the contact person, and his or her immediate supervisor or principal on the cover page of the project application. This is really important so that you can be contacted in case the review committee has questions. Notification of grant funding is made about 30 days after the proposal deadline. Now, should you desire funding for more than 1 year, please note that you must resubmit your application each year. The School Foundation does not fund multiple year projects. How much funding should you request? For major grants, it must be $10,000 or greater, and it must have the potential for district-wide impact. Many grants, however, are specifically designed to change something that's happening in the classroom, and those must range between $200 and $500. You may recreate the application on a computer. We ask that you use Times New Roman 12-point font. You also may take advantage of the electronic template for completion of the proposal as well. Signatures are required. All applications must contain original signatures of the contact person, the supervisor, the principal. And please note that if you are submitting a grant that includes technology, such as iPads, iPods, computers, e-readers, any of those kinds of current instructional technology pieces, the Director of Instructional Technology must also sign off on those grants. Do note that there are special requirements if your grant involves iPods or iPads. First, you really need to speak with the Director of Instructional Technology in the planning stages to be sure that your concept fits with the FSD1 technology plan for your school. After the proposal is completed, IT will also need to sign that they approve your plan if it is funded. The second requirement is that all teachers who will receive or use the iPods or iPads through TSF grants must complete the Florence School District 1 iPod/iPad class, and it can be taken during the 2015-16 fall semester if needed. So please note that you'll need to provide a letter from Florence School District 1 stating that the course has been successfully completed as a part of your grant application. There is a limit on the number of pages that may be submitted for both major grants and mini grants. Major grants may not exceed 20 pages. and that includes a single page for the cover sheet, the executive summary, and the budget. And the remaining 17 pages are used to provide the narrative for all other sections of the major grant proposal. Mini grants may not exceed 7 pages, and those 7 pages include a single cover sheet page followed by the template that includes coverage of all other required sections. After the proposal review process is complete, the School Foundation will host an awards reception in May at the Florence County Library. Additionally, follow-up visits to instructional areas may be made by members of the School Foundation Board of Directors and the Executive Director. We hope that this presentation will provide you with some initial support as you begin to think about your project, and also ongoing support as you develop the proposal and prepare it for submission. If you have additional questions, however, please contact Mr. Randy Kuhn, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, or Mrs. Debbie Heiler, Executive Director of the School Foundation Board. Thank you for considering the grant process, and we wish you the best of luck as you move forward.